Hey, what's happening? Chris Martinez here. I am the host of Operation Agency Freedom, and today we are going to be talking about why the cost of goods sold is the first and absolute only metric that I look at when I'm starting to evaluate a marketing agency and why you should too. So I know finance isn't always the most exciting thing. And honestly, like I'm not a finance person by background. I went to college for sociology. But as I've learned what it takes to grow a marketing agency, the first thing that we do is we look at the numbers. And the most important metric that I've seen, and I've yet to find anybody who's proven me wrong, is their cost of goods sold. Just by looking at that cost of goods sold, I can tell so much about that business and what are the things that they're going to need to improve to most of the time improve their profitability. So if you're wondering about what are some of the financial metrics that you need to be looking at as an agency owner, if you're wondering about how you can grow your own profitability, and if you just want to kind of get a general, I don't know, crash course on agency finance, pay attention to this episode because you're going to love it. So, with that being said, let's head over to the podcast. All right, welcome back and thank you for joining me. So, today we're going to be talking about agency finance, which I know, I get it. Most people, it makes your eyes glaze over because it's not exciting. But I'm telling you, what's really like bums you out is when you don't have any money. Like you're working super, super hard in your agency. And at the end of every month, there's not enough money left over. Right. And it's really frustrating when you see everybody else getting paid, right? Like account managers are getting paid, project managers are getting paid, leadership team is getting paid. And yet, for some reason, you can't seem to find enough ways to increase your own profitability. And, you can't give yourself any like profit distributions or anything like that. So let's talk about today. We're going to be diving into cost of goods sold. So, really quickly, let me just define what cost of goods sold. Essentially, it's what we spend to create our product. So, if we were in another industry and we're making, I always use the example of pizzas because when I was in high school, I worked at Chuck E. Cheese. So many great lessons working for that company. But when we were making pizzas, right, it's the dough, it's the sauce, it's the cheese. Cheese is actually one of the most expensive ingredients on the pizza. And then, of course, there's the pepperoni and the mushrooms and the olives and all the other stuff that they put on the pizzas and the pineapple, because I like pineapple on pizza. Okay. Don't hate them. So that's the cost of goods sold if you're making pizzas. And then, of course, you also have the labor that's baking the pizza. So you have your cook, right? That basically encapsulates the majority of their cost of goods sold. There's probably some things that I'm forgetting. That's essentially what their cost of goods sold is. Now, in our business, because we don't have physical products for the most part, you're creating digital assets or deliverables for those clients. So we don't have pepperonis and mushrooms and sauce, and dough and cheese and stuff like that. The majority of our cost of goods sold is going to be labor. And so when we're calculating how much we should charge or when we look at how much we're charging, I should say, we should say, okay, this product I'm going to sell for $3,000 a month. And then for agencies, the goal is to be able to get it done for 30 to 35% of what you sold it for. So very simple math. If you sell something for $1,000 a month, you have to be able to get that produced and out the door, of course, get results for clients for 300 to 350 bucks. Now, so from there, you basically need to say, okay, so of that 300 to $350 budget that I have, how many hours is it going to take to get it done? And how much am I paying that individual per hour, that designer, developer, ads, strategist, whatever they are? How much am I paying that person? Or most of the time, it's multiple people touching a project every single month. So those are the numbers. That's the way that you basically calculate your cost of goods sold. There's some other things like commissions if you have salespeople, the credit card fees, which we have to endure, which I hate. I usually put that underneath cost of goods sold. So you basically need to make sure that you guys are classifying your cost of goods sold properly and that you personally understand cost of goods sold. So, pop quiz. What is cost of goods sold? If you said it's how much we spend to get our products out the door, perfect. Okay. Now, again, pop quiz. What's the percentage that your cost of goods sold should be? 30 to 35%. I know I can hear you. I see you. You're nodding and you're like, oh, 30, 35%. You're in your car, you're driving and you're saying it out loud with me, 30 to 35%. So when I'm looking at an agency, whether it's somebody wants to buy an agency or they're having some challenges in their own agency, or a lot of the times they just want to some validation, right? They just want somebody else to look at their numbers and say, like, am I actually doing good? So the first thing that I look at, and the most important thing, is the cost of goods sold. Because I will tell you, it's almost like an epidemic of people that are running their business and spending way too much to get those projects out the door. And I'm talking like 60, 70%. It's almost like they're inverted, like your cost of goods sold should be 30% and your profit, your gross profit should be 70%. And a lot of agencies have it reversed. Their cost of goods sold is 70% and their gross profit is like 30%. So that's the first thing that I'll look at. And then from there, I can basically determine what other challenges they have, but the cost of goods sold is absolutely the first indicator. And usually what happens if we see an agency that has their cost of goods sold that is way too high, it's usually a couple of things. So maybe they're undercharging. So they might be charging, maybe this was like their startup strategies. They were going to go in and they were going to try and undercut the market, charge less than everybody else, get a bunch of clients, and then maybe they thought about raising prices later on, or maybe they're learning like there's a reason why these other guys charge so much. And so, we'll look at that. And so maybe their prices are too low. So we've got to, create a price increase strategy. That doesn't happen that often though. The majority of the time it's because they're just very inefficient. So they haven't even looked at how much time it should take to create a deliverable. So the phrase that I love to say, it's if you control the minutes, then you control the dollars. It's very true in this business. So you should know within an hour or two how long each deliverable should take. And then you, as the owner, you can basically determine how much you should spend or how much you will spend to get that project completed. It's not rocket science, right? Now, if you don't know, then speak to other people that are experts. You can ask us. We can tell you, like, based on what we see, this is how long that should take. And we can give you a range, but it's not that hard to figure out how long approximately things should take. Then you just have to go back and double check. So this is going to require that you time track. And this is another reason that we require you to do time tracking, is because it allows us to have data where we can analyze what's actually going on. Because what typically happens with your employees is they're going to say, oh, that took me 3 hours. Well, in reality, when we time track, we're like, oh, it's actually taking you 6. And people are notorious for underestimating the amount of time that things actually take them to do. So if they say it's 3 hours and you budget, hey, it's supposed to be 3 hours, but then it ends up being 6 hours, guess what? You spent twice as much. You spent twice as much to get that thing out the door. So that means your cost doubled and you didn't even know. This is the most common, by the way, is that there's no time tracking in place and there's some inefficiencies. People aren't working the way that they need to be doing, or maybe they have some obstacles or whatever. I'm not saying they're bad people. A lot of the times just don't know. And so we go in and we analyze that. And we're like, okay, cool. Well, here's the culprit. The culprit. Just got to tighten things up. We got to enable people and hold them accountable to doing things in the time frame that we know that they need to do them. And of course, there's going to be some people that can't do the job the way that we need them to. And sometimes we have to make some hard decisions after trying to train them up that it's just not the right fit and we got to let them go. But it's like, what do you want? You want the business to continue to struggle and you don't make any money and you can't invest in the things that you want to do? Or do you want to let somebody go and bring on a team member who can actually do the job? It's a pretty easy decision, in my opinion. So that's the other one, is the inefficiencies in the business. And there's one more reason why the cost of goods is too high, and it's that we have people on staff that are just too expensive. And so you might look at your pricing and you say, okay, this is what my budget is. Let's just use that example. $300 to $350 a month, if you're charging $1,000 a month. And let's say you have somebody on the team and they're $50 an hour, right? And so if you have that $50 an hour person working on these projects, you only get 6 hours, 6 or 7 hours of that person per month. And maybe it requires 20 hours a month to get the job done. Well, you look at those numbers and it's just never going to pan out, right? Like you can never get 20 hours of work and 20 hours of, you can never get the budget to match what's required if you're using that $50 an hour person. So ultimately, in those decisions, it's just truly financial. You're going to have to find a way to get it done, and you can't use that $50 an hour person anymore. So I'm not saying get rid of that $50 an hour person because they're probably very, very valuable to the company. You're just going to have to assign them to other tasks where what their fee is matches up with the size of the client and the revenue. So that's the third one is basically you just have people that are working on these projects that are a little bit too expensive for the budget that you have in mind. So those are the three. And if you look at those in your own agency, like if you're struggling or you just want to kind of know where you're at, if you analyze those things, that'll give you pretty much everything that you need to know. And then from there, all the other things are easy, right? So there's 6 main reasons why agencies aren't profitable. First one, and the most common one, is the cost of goods. Second is operating expenses. Third is sales are inconsistent. Fourth is your churn rate. Fifth is you're charging too little. And the sixth one is you don't have the leadership team in place to help make decisions. But I'm telling you, cost of goods is like for over 80% of agencies that are struggling, that's the one area of improvement. And that's great because we can start making impacts there like right away. Just so you know, like if you're going to start making some changes in your cost of goods sold, like trying to improve that, and you recognize, hey, I'm at that 60% mark and I know I want to get it down to 30, 35. I would not start slashing things like crazy right now. Like don't just automatically just fire all the staff and be like, okay, now I'm down at 30%. That would be not smart because most likely you're going to have a lot of things break and then you're going to potentially have a lot of churn. So the key is to make small, consistent improvements. I'm talking like trying to move that needle maybe 1% a month. So as the revenue grows, you're reducing that budget just a little bit. So it goes from 60 to 59, then 58. Over time, it's like a diet, like crash diets don't work. So this is why we want to do small incremental improvements. So every month you just make a little bit of improvement. And before you know it, you'll be back in the range that you need to be in, and the business will be really healthy. And the best part is that it's going to be sustainable. The most important things is when you're making these changes, they need to be sustainable. You need to be able to keep these changes in place for the long term. So that's why I recommend that you do small improvements over time. Slow and steady wins the race, and eventually you'll get there. So hopefully that was helpful for you guys, and you're going to be improving your cost of goods, and now you're going to start being super, super profitable. So if you have any questions, of course, reach out to us. This is exactly what we do. That being said, have a great day.
Hey, thank you for listening. And if you enjoyed this episode, it would mean so much to me if you would subscribe to the podcast and also share it with friends, family, and basically anyone you know who will find the same value in this episode as you do. So, to get the latest from me, then let's connect on social media on the Facebooks at facebook.com/dude agency or Instagram at dudeagency.io. Then you can also find us on LinkedIn, YouTube, and even TikTok. Yes, I'm that cool. We are on TikTok. Finally, go to our website at dudeagency.io, where you can see all of our other episodes of Operation Agency Freedom, register for live trainings on how to run a highly profitable agency, and you can see exactly how we help marketing agencies fix their operations and scale to 8 figures and beyond. Thanks again for listening, and I will see you next time.